Remarkable acknowledges the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are gathered today. This is their land, never ceded, always sacred. And we pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the traditions, the culture and the hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples across the nation. We acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the remarkable contribution they make to Australian life. And we would also like to acknowledge the advocates who have played a role in advancing the rights of people with disability, leading to address the inequalities faced by people with disability. They have paved the way for us. We carry a privilege and a responsibility because of that history. We are better together.
What do you get when you combine a futurist, disability advocate, entrepreneur, and the courage to challenge the metaverse? That's right, Giselle Mota. We're speaking with Giselle, creator of NFTY Collective, a project on a mission to bring disability inclusion into Web3 and the metaverse. You will also hear exactly what the heck the metaverse is and why it's important we build with inclusion and accessibility from the start.
I always like to ask people, because this will be a video podcast as well, to do a visual description of themselves. Would you mind if you just did a visual description of your beautiful self and the setting that you're in?
Thank you. I'm sitting in my living room in an apartment in New York City. I have an art on the wall, a little couch, a little lamp. I am sitting in a chair. I'm wearing a dark green cardigan, a white shirt. My hair is brown and black, and I have and it's long to kind of my shoulder length. I'm a black woman or a woman of color, and I have big green glasses on. Hopefully, that's a good description.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, I'd love to pass it over to you to start with, and just to learn. You know, you've spoken about how embracing your identity has really empowered you to sort of enter this new chapter of your career. And can you speak to that a bit and share that journey with us?
Sure. Well, I do a lot of different things. So in my career, my full-time work is that I'm a head of product or chief of product inclusion at this company that deals with like human capital management technology. And then I have my own project called NFTY Collective, which is all about bringing people with disabilities into Web3 and the metaverse. So really, I came to a point where before I had been focusing a lot on the future of work per se. So how do organizations use technologies like artificial intelligence and data analytics and all these different types of tools to solve for problems and to think about what's the future look like when it comes to work. But it was awesome to be able to do those things. But for me, the past couple of years, and a little bit more, the pandemic, the racial and social injustices that were happening around the world, like it really made me stop and think about how I was using my time and what I was doing with my impact. As an Afro-Latina, I'm a woman of color, I have an unseen disability of dyslexia, and I was really impacted by everything that was happening around the world, and I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to like channel my energy into something positive instead of sitting on frustration. So it led me to take forward actions and just be proactive. And so I stopped just looking at the future of work, and I started thinking about the future of technology and the future of work. And is it inclusive? Are we bringing people along with us? And I did every effort I could. So basically the role that I have in my full-time work is a role that was created because I was proactive, and it never was a role that was existed before in my company, in an organization of over 60,000 global employees. And now I'm heading up something that's thinking about inclusion in our products because I care about it. And now I'm doing this project of my own called NFTY Collective because I really don't want to see people left out of emerging technology, especially people with disabilities. So basically, I came to accept and not just accept, but like embrace and stand for everything that I am as an individual. And I wanted to channel that energy into my passions and nerdiness, if you will, of tech.
You're in good company. So I'm an absolute self-proclaimed nerd. And it's so wonderful to sort of lead with that passion and be able to bring to the table that lived experience that you have, and this sort of natural born innovator and problem solver that you have explained or identified as before. And there's this great story you talk about the sort of tall chocolate mocha. Oh, I don't know if you call them chocolate mochas, but I just think it's such a great story of how you went through your journey at high school to ordering a coffee and now to being really proud of where you're at. And can you sort of speak to that journey of how you built that confidence over time?
Yeah. I think you're referring to, I gave a TEDx talk and I was talking about my struggles, even with, as a person with dyslexia. I sometimes get things very mixed up. And so I'll go to order something, even at a Starbucks or something, and I will see it. I know what I'm trying to say because I see it on the menu, but by the time that it comes out, I flip it around because it's just kind of how I'm seeing it at the moment. So I just confused the barista really when I went to make my order. That was my story. But I think growing up, I really thought that I was less than. I thought that I was not smart enough, because it was hard for me to retain information. It was difficult to read something and really have reading comprehension. That was not my strong suit. I was more of like a mathematical mind, or someone who likes to put concepts and puzzles together and find patterns. But give me words, and I was like, yeah, not so much. So, that journey was really, thankfully, my mother and a few key teachers and people along my way, they believed in me enough to cultivate the areas that I was strong in and give me a chance. And so they saw that I was really good at certain things. They invested in that. And, I started to learn, even through dyslexia, of, okay, if I'm really good at making patterns, then I can apply that same skill set that I use with numbers and physical items and tinkering around with objects and pulling them apart. I can apply that to things like structuring a paper. It has a pattern to it. It has a flow. So, and I would tell this to anyone listening: if you have a child or you yourself have dyslexia or something similar, or anything, start to think about what are you good at or what are they good at, and start to use that, apply that. So I started to look at a paper is, you start off with like a main idea and you make your intro, and you want to present maybe three main ideas at the beginning. Okay, a pattern. And then you structure your next three paragraphs of, this is point one, point two, point three. Then you summarize everything at the end. And I became a whiz in writing papers because I looked at it like a pattern, and actually that skill set became so strong that I graduated my graduate school with like the golden key, which is 4.0, the highest grade point average you can get. And it was all writing. So imagine that, someone who couldn't write well and couldn't read well because of dyslexia, like I was able to apply a skill set and exceed.
And I suppose as someone who loves, patterns, it completely makes sense that technology is sort of your ballpark, and the idea of something like the metaverse being such a creative concept excites you. And I suppose, how do you explain to someone who doesn't have any understanding of blockchains or Web3 or the metaverse, what this sort of like creative space could do for the world, and how it could change their world for the better?
Yeah, I would say that it's very likened to, we've been borrowing concepts. So we've been borrowing concepts from games, and think of your favorite animation movie that you've probably seen. Like maybe Avatar is up there for me, like the movie Avatar, and all of those key inputs that are coming through, so that if you're wearing a device and it picks up on when you're moving your hands, when you're moving your head, if you're dancing, and all of that is coming through the computer to then make what we see as an animated film. Because there's actually someone in a studio with haptics on, or gloves, or sometimes things, and that data signal is just feeding into a technology to help you see the experience that you're seeing. So we have been learning from that. We've been learning from gaming. So whenever your kids are playing on, when we started back in the day on whatever, like a PlayStation or an Xbox, or now kids are using things like Roblox and Minecraft and all these kind of things, that concept has morphed into other use cases and applications. So now people are reimagining. They're like, okay, if kids can play and animations can happen on movies and kids can play in these like virtual worlds, then why can't we gather together and socialize in places like that? And why can't we learn a new skill in an environment like that that's virtual? Or why can't we actually work on a project together in an environment like that? So all of that is what we're calling the metaverse. And the metaverse is this place of like play and discovery and imagination. It is using things like data and artificial intelligence and augmented reality and virtual realities behind the scenes. So that's all the tech that goes behind it. But the user experience at the end is all about like imagining, like it's like a game. It's like animations, but for other cases that we want to use in the real world. So you can go to a concert, a virtual concert on and watch somebody in their avatar, and you could be an avatar and enjoy that experience. So yeah, that's what it is. That's what the metaverse is.
I mean, with my dance moves, it would probably be safer for everyone involved if it was virtual. uh, that's it, and that's amazing that you mentioned the gaming industry, because I know that I don't know. I don't pretend to be an expert on anything, but there's been a lot of work done about the accessibility and inclusion of the gaming industry, and it's made a huge amount of waves recently. And I wonder, is there a conversation or a debate, around the accessibility and inclusion of the metaverse and the critical importance of that currently?
Yes, absolutely. So right now, as it stands, the metaverse is not the most inclusive. It is not the most accessible for people with disabilities either. In fact, when you do go into a lot of these experiences at the beginning, it was all around like VR goggles that you have to put on this heavy set on your head, and some people have motion sickness. Some people have eye tracking issues where you won't be able to enjoy that experience, or perhaps you may be low vision or completely blind, and how can you enjoy something that's only fixed on a mechanism of a headset, right? So that was a stumbling block, and in fact some legislation has come down the line in certain experiences now that you have to, if you're going to create experiences like that on the metaverse and things, you have to make it inclusive outside of a VR set so that many people can enjoy it. So today you can get on the computer, you can get on a mobile device and still hop into one of these experiences without having to have an expensive and maybe uncomfortable or inaccessible, VR set. So yeah, it's also not inclusive in the fact that when you play a lot of these games, there's stairs. Or when you get into these experiences, there's stairs, or your avatar is not really someone that you can see. If you look like someone who has no arms, no legs, you're in a wheelchair, you use a walking device. The way that these systems work for avatar creation, they don't always recognize that that's a human being or that's a person. So it won't track it's called rigging, and it won't track that, oh, that's a human in a device, in a wheelchair. It'll be like unrecognizable. It won't understand that that's a human in a wheelchair. So today you don't see a lot of like characters that you could use as an avatar in these spaces that have like mobility devices and things like that. So not very accessible even the tech itself. Imagine if you'd have to have the tech in a way where assistive technologies can adapt to it. So if you don't have arms, and you still want to toggle around, how do you do that? Can you use your mouth and a stick device to help you get around? Can you use your eyes to track? So all of those are things that need to be considered.
And I don't lie. I don't actually the status of where the design of the metaverse and the different ways that you can access it is something I'm not terribly aware of. But from where it's at now, you sort of speak like it currently isn't accessible. How has it gotten to that point of the design phase and these things are only registering now? Is it that there just was no consultation with the disability community, or with humans at large from the get-go? Is that?
It would seem that way. And you know what? The disability community says a lot. Like it should be for us and it should be by us, right? So like anything that you're going to be making, you should definitely include all sorts of different people who could be your end user in the experience when you're first starting to design it. So I would assume that there was not a lot of people at the table who had disabilities when people were formulating, it would be a good idea to have some virtual world and create these spaces, because they weren't really thinking. So now it's catching up to where others like myself are saying, wait a minute, we need to like make this more accessible, and or like me, you're saying, you know what, it's not accessible, so I'm gonna create opportunities where they are more accessible. And so we're having like rebellious people like me step in and try to change things right now. That's what's happening.
I think it's brilliant. You rebel. And I suppose, knowing that it is uh, sort of in that early stage of, it hasn't fully taken over as, sort of, that sounds a bit intense, but, it hasn't, it's not fully embedded into society just yet.
Right. It's not widely adopted yet, right? No.
Yeah. So is it still at that point where we can sort of catch it before it goes, and there's opportunities to rework the foundation so they do have inclusion and accessibility as a real foundation of this platform?
Yes, now is the time. Absolutely. So I'd actually recommend, and what I'm doing with my project, NFTY Collective, is working with technology providers who really didn't start off thinking about accessibility or people with disabilities. And now we're collaborating together to work on projects and ways in which we're doing something, for example, in Sandbox, the game Sandbox, which is a major metaverse platform. We should be there by January of 2023 in a game experience where we're going to try to make it as accessible as that platform provides. And we're going to have people with disabilities throughout the game. So that's a way, again, where we're injecting ourselves into things like this so that groups like them and groups like others who really didn't start off that way, thinking with disability in mind, well, now they're starting, at least, by collaborating with people like me. But there's many other people as well that I'm sure are stepping up to do things as well.
And I suppose the looking to the future of that is, how do you think we go about policing the integrity of those that intentional commitment to inclusion and accessibility, just knowing that the landscape of technology and accessibility is constantly shifting and changing? What do you how do you sort of police that integrity in this new sort of space?
For sure. I think one of the ways that we're starting to see there's associations starting to form and legislation starting to come down the pipeline to legislate and regulate. If you are having some sort of technology experience, you have to consider accessibility. You have to consider all kinds of inclusion. So you might have a person of color that has experienced this, or people of different gender representations, or people who speak different languages or live in different parts of the world. You can't just create something with one scope in mind anymore, including people with disabilities. You have to think about that. So that's happening now. There's many groups of people that are forming these coalitions and associations and drafting out laws. So that's promising. So.
Yeah. And I think this will sort of bridge into this. I'm excited to dive into the NFTY Collective, but I suppose, there's so many amazing opportunities that something like this could offer. But there's also that sort of debate in that, in these sort of digital spaces, when you give people that creative autonomy, sometimes existing stereotypes and misconceptions are sort of translated into something like this. And that includes things like ableism and perhaps things about and maybe the other side of that is encouraging, because of that ableism, people with disability, not choosing to choose an avatar perhaps that truly represents them, and instead opting for something, that sort of internalized ableism. What are your thoughts on that? And I know that we'll speak about NFTY next, is sort of
That's
trying
so
to...
I love that you just talked about internalized ableism. That's an interesting concept. So I think that this is a space where you're right. A lot of people are showing, and they've already shown studies where people are discriminating against people, and even like there's harassment. You might think about that. I mean, come on, people. Like, you can be a woman avatar, and then all of a sudden somebody comes up to you and starts to try to grope you as your avatar experience. Like, this is mind-boggling. But if whatever happens in normal physical society, if it doesn't really get addressed, obviously it's going to repeat itself in virtual, experiences as well. So that's a problem. And then same with people with disabilities, they can get, harassed or discriminated against if they do show up perhaps as that avatar. But then there's this interesting nuance as well around some people with disabilities might want to have an avatar experience where they don't have their disability, because maybe for them it's like this space where you can be and imagine and be creative and whoever you want to be. What if you want to, like, you don't have legs and you do want to have legs as your avatar? That's your choice. But what I was trying to do too, and we'll get to it in a second, was like, we don't often see them the other. It's not really choice if all you have are able bodies. The choice comes in when you also can have an avatar that does represent your physical identity. And now you can choose if you want to be an able-bodied person, if you want to be Snoop Dogg as an avatar on Sandbox, or if you want to be, yourself as you are represented. So that's something that that's very interesting concept. And I think the key here is to provide people with choice. When we don't provide people with choice, then we are boxing them into one identity. And that's the same thing with, like, if you go to other platforms and spaces and you just try out some technologies and you create an avatar, you might get something that looks like you, or not, because I have try to make avatars of myself, and it's very Eurocentric. It gives me very, very straight hair. Today I have a little bit of straight hair, but normally I have big curly hair. Normally I got big curly hair, and so you don't see that option as an avatar, and you don't see your skin tone. Like, they really fade me out and make me super pale as an avatar. Or my body is not slim and tall, but your avatar is slim and tall, because why? They trained it on a specific model, and that model obviously wasn't very diverse. And so that's the issues that we're starting to see in some of these platforms. But yeah, so it's about choice to me to fix that.
Mm. And I suppose that leads beautifully to, the work that you're doing with the NFTY Collective. What exactly is your sole mission with this incredible initiative?
Yeah. The mission is to highlight amazing people, right? And to give them the opportunity, and I'm talking about people with disabilities, and to give them the opportunity to show up as they are in Web3 and metaverse spaces. And so for me, it's a space, like we've been discussing, that severely lacks diversity. It severely lacks representation of people with disabilities. So we're working with people from around the world. Some of them, we have a Paralympian named Lex Gillette. We have an actor from Hulu named Steve Way. We have a lot of different people of fashion, who are in the fashion world. Victoria Jenkins from the UK created an inclusive fashion line and was in London Fashion Week last year, promoting the line. And we have Dr. Tiffany Jaina, who is a non-binary author on things about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So many beautiful, amazing individuals who just happen to have a disability. And we created avatars in their likeness. And we're using those avatars we provide them as an NFT to some of them, a non-fungible token where they can, like, create value with that and sell it or trade it if they want to. We're making games out of these avatars, so that they could show up in experiences. We're doing a lot of different things, but I'm being rebellious and just interjecting people into a space that has not included them. And that's what I'm up to. That's what I'm doing.
I think it's incredible, because although it's a rebellion, it's a celebration, and that is what everyone's catching on to, is what you're doing is good and should have been done. And you're rebelling against a system that will have to put its hand up and say, we were the ones that did wrong. And I think it's so cool.
We have the opportunity to do right. So
yeah.
fix it.
Totally. And I suppose you've sort of already answered that, the question of why representation matters in this sort of context. But I suppose, like, what is it that using these sort of avatars, what is it opening up? When people step into a space like the metaverse and they have an avatar that represents themselves, what are the other doors that open all of a sudden that create what happens? What's the ripple effect?
So many, and I will start with an intrinsic one. I'll start with so a lot of times I've spoken with people with disabilities, and we started very organically. We started to reach out to people and ask them simply, "Would you like us to create an avatar of you?" And we explained to them what we were doing, and they wanted to be a part of it. And when they did, in many cases, we would have people literally start crying or literally just express how honored and touched that they were that somebody thought of them enough to not leave them out of something that was coming out yet again that was going to leave them out. And that has humbled me. That's been a very humbling experience for me. Even though I'm a person with a disability, it's a disability that is unseen and often is one of those neurodivergence that is more easily to deal. It's easier to deal with. In fact, like LinkedIn, you recently came out with a skill. You know how you could say like, oh, I'm good at resume writing, or I'm good at interviewing or sales. There's a skill now that, this is to show you how widely adopted and accepted dyslexia is, that there's a skill of dyslexic thinking. And so like it's become something where people are like, oh, that's, great, that you have this skill set. However, what about autistic thinking? What about just neurodivergent thinking in general? Because we tend to like put these associations and classes on different, even types of disabilities. And so anyways, I think that it's important to make representation, and I feel like that's opening a door to make it more normal and to shed a light on that. Hey, when you design any technology, you should be including people with disabilities. They should weigh in and give input on what this is. And there's so many examples I can give you. I'll try to tell you a couple things that have come up apart from that, but like we're working with an individual who has muscular dystrophy, and he is an artist and actually based in Singapore, an amazing rapper, super talented young man. And he lives with the reality that he doesn't know, because he has a degenerative disease that is eating away at his muscle. And so years ago, as a child, he was able to walk. Then he had to use mobility devices. Now he's in a wheelchair. And he doesn't know how much life he has on this earth. And a lot of the people that we work with, they have such conditions that sometimes, again, you just don't know with certain disabilities. And what I'm really aiming to do as well, and I don't want to get emotional here, but what I am aiming to do is also give people a chance to see themselves in an experience that's so cool and so forward thinking that they could say, I was a part of that during my lifetime. I was a part of this experience. And so those are the kind of doors that open up as well. Now we are being invited to create games and inclusive art galleries with some of our characters, and learning and development experiences for organizations. And some people have asked us, can we use your characters to add on to our products, so that we can, if we do have a little character in our product somewhere, it can be someone with a disability. So there's so many different like opportunities that are coming up, and the sky's the limit.
It's incredible.
You got me emotional. You shouldn't have asked me that question. I got a little choked up.
This is a safe space. I welcome tears. I cry at the drop of a hat. So, and I absolutely push back if it's too personal. But I'd love to know. You talk about how you have a disability that is hidden, and in some ways that makes it easier, but I suspect in some ways that also makes it harder, because they're not. I wonder if you've had moments in your life where you felt that you've had to sort of, in many ways, prove something, whether that's to yourself or to people, and that could be in the advocacy space all the way to, the entrepreneur space, to the work you're doing as, being in such a high role, guiding inclusion. I wonder, how has that sort of been recreated as you're making avatars that are inherently visual, and yet you're visually representing part of you that is invisible? Does it? Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I've done for characters that you can't see their disability is on our characters all have sunglasses on. They actually have a very like urban look. So we all have them don a beanie cap. I don't know if that's how they say it in Australia.
Yeah, yeah, beanie.
Okay, and then they wear like a jumpsuit or a romper kind of situation, a whole one piece, and then they have sneakers on or tennis shoes or I don't know again how you say it in Australia, but they like sports shoes that you wear like that, and then they have these sunglasses. The ones that have sunglasses that have a particular abstract design on them, ones like me who have neurodivergence or chronic illness, or maybe they're a cancer survivor and they have some effects because of that, and that is all represented in, hey, we see something differently, there's something about us that you can't see, but that's a marker and an identifier of that. So that's one thing. And I think to answer your first question, it's I have always had and I've always felt this need to belong, or to show that I belong in spaces. And it's not only because of, when I was a kid, I did think that I was less than, or I was less intelligent because of my dyslexia, but it was also because I navigate in a world where my parents immigrated from the Dominican Republic. I'm a Latina, but I'm a Latina and I'm Black. Because, the diaspora of Africans, in slavery that moved around, especially across the Americas, we are all over the world. And some of us are Italian Blacks, some of us are Latino Blacks, or some of us are Black from all the Caribbean and all that. And so when people saw me growing up in the United States to a family that spoke a different language, and I was raised in an area, in a neighborhood that was predominantly African American, and then I have this disability and I'm struggling through school. It was like so many things. And I've always, imagine, I'm sure you've been through things sometimes where even just because of being a woman, you experience certain biases or certain discriminations here and there. So imagine that compounded with a learning disability, with the color of your skin, the language that your parents speak, the neighborhood that you were raised in. So many different things come up. So I've always had that sense where it's a reality, and I guess there's a part of me where I just have to think about where has that shown up in my life in different areas. But I think people like me often tend to really try to do the most, like we say here in the States a little bit. Like we try to over exceed, right? Try to do too much. And I've learned also within those past couple of years of everything that was happening to give myself more grace and to give myself to relax that, and so because of that, I started to focus on not just being this person who was speaking on stages and doing all these things in the future of work. It was great, but I also tapped into my creativity. I tapped into a place where I wanted to design and make art of characters, and I wanted to have more fun, and I wanted to embrace all of my identity, and that's what showed up in this project. So long story short, but it was a long story long, but that's what it is.
It was a brilliant story, and I think it speaks volumes to the mission that you're on with NFTY, because it comes from a personal place of just providing a space for people who perhaps didn't have a space, and providing. I think there's something about the metaverse that represents a real possibility for community, without boundaries and barriers, and it poses so many potentials, and there are a lot of risks that I'm completely unaware of, but I'm sort of already a little bit nervous about. And what do you think, being so closely and emotionally involved in this project? What do you think about the risks involved in this space and in bringing these avatars into a space?
Yeah. It's funny. I'm guarding this project because of risks. I'm guarding it. I'm being careful with it. I'm not opening it to just everybody and anybody can do anything. In fact, even people with disabilities have sometimes approached from an angle that is not mission centric to what I'm trying to do. And I've said, I've had to turn some people away for wanting to kind of even look at this as a way to monetize or to do something where it's not the mission center that I want to focus on. So all sides, there's risk from all sides. There's risks from the people in the community themselves who are, that might not align to the vision that I have and what we're trying to do. And then there's risks to other people who have approached me about funding opportunities, but they only see it as like, they do the math. They're like, wait, there's 1 billion people in the world with disabilities. And if you do this, then we can do, and I'm like, so there's a lot of, from the angle of disabilities, there's a risk. From the angle of technologies and what they're trying to do in a space of the metaverse as well, and how if they don't put guardrails, to your point that you were saying before, that people can be exploited, people can be discriminated against, like there's a lot of things that can happen. So I'm being very careful and very calculated with who we partner with, what we collaborate on, and how we're using these characters. So really good question. You asked some really good questions, but you must do this often.
I've just got a really great guest. I'm so excited by the friendship. And I mean, if you could get words to people that perhaps you haven't partnered with already, but are sort of giants in the space, or maybe they're really, taking up as much territory as they can, like Meta. What would you say to them with this project in mind, and as they're trying to step into this space?
If you're trying to truly do a difference when it comes to inclusion, not that you're only trying to profit and maximize upon a certain demographic, none of that. If you are truly trying to find a way to be more inclusive of people with disabilities, then let's talk about a partnership. Let's talk about a collaboration, and then we can discuss that. And there's so many. And if you even outside of collaborating with NFTY Collective, if you're really interested in making a difference, start to invite people with disabilities into the production of your technology. And I'll just share that with everyone. So whether you have to hire a UX designer, an accessibility consultant, whoever it is, you should have people with disabilities working on aspects of your product, not just about accessibility, but have them represented in that as well. So I would say open it up, people. So if that's what you want to do, put your commitments, put some action behind words and commitments.
I suppose what I would love to know is that you had to work with so many different people as you've made these avatars and as you've built this community with NFTY. What are some of the learnings that you've had just navigating the different languages that people use and the way they identify?
Yes. I've learned a lot from people with disabilities that I didn't, just because I'm talking about disabilities, I'm not an expert at all things disabilities, but the people with disabilities are more of the experts than I am. So, even in creating one of our characters, Mary Harmon is a speaker and a consultant based in Hawaii. She's a Latina. And she was, we were going to create her character, and we wanted to make a signal on her hand where she was working in American Sign Language, where she did something in sign language. And we asked her, and originally we thought like it would be okay to put it, for example, the I love you sign, right? Something like this. And we created it, we mocked it up, we showed her, and she's like, yeah, I don't really, I don't want to show I love you as a sign. And we were kind of thinking and going back and forth, and I got her input to finally we came up with her avatar. You'll see it by default is set on saying hello in sign language. And also she taught me that you don't say hearing impaired for someone who is deaf or hard of hearing. You rather say those two latter forms. So I'm learning from a lot of people. I'm learning what to say, what not to say, how they want to be represented. One of our avatars as well is has muscular dystrophy, and they were telling us that they're like, I'm very sensitive to what my hair looks like and how that shows up. Because of their condition, they have some deformities and some different formities. And one of the things that they try to take a lot of pride in is their hair. So it's very interesting that people with disabilities sometimes will focus very keenly on a particular physical aspect that they want to make sure shows up in a certain way. Maybe because they take pride in that area or something. So we've gotten very keen to say, okay, well, how do you want your hair to show up? How would you like us to show this or that and the other? And we're trying to respect that along the way. So it's just been listening and considering people.
That's awesome. And is there a future for a NFTY avatar that would, if someone is low vision or blind, is there sort of any future for a character to be sort of based on haptics or I don't know, an audio described experience for someone?
Yes, absolutely. That's on the roadmap. So we have a couple things on the roadmap. One of them is using an algorithm and artificial intelligence to turn an image into sound. So we next have ways in which we want to get the people who are not able to see their avatar or experience it in that way visually, that they'll be able to hear a version of what they look like. And so it sounds super nerdy, but that's a possibility, and we're exploring that. We're also exploring, we're doing a virtual gallery, an art gallery, and we're making sure that it has audio descriptions so that someone who's low vision or blind can enjoy that experience without having to see it. They could still enjoy going to a gallery, right? We just did an experience recently through augmented reality where you put up your phone or your mobile device and you scan a QR code and you're able to see an experience like the story of NFTY Collective. What we did with that is that right after the first version of that story, it was an audio description version of that story, so that people using a screen reader and still have the ability to like pop up the experience on their mobile device could then hear it and enjoy everything else that was happening, from the background music to the descriptions of the characters and all that. And we will continue to do that.
Wow. And it's like I'm not gonna lie. When I first heard of the metaverse, I was a little scared. I just kind of thought, oh gosh, I've seen so many movies, and that's pretty much the only basis for my fear. It was movies. But hearing this and the excitement of these amazing things, it just sounds like you say, like a playful land that we can go and just have all of these really creative experiences. Um, like what is on the roadmap next for the future of if we're really headed towards what will be an incredible, accessible, inclusive and diverse metaverse? What, like, how bold can we think? What are the things people will be able to imagine in that place?
Yeah, the sky is the limit. So recently, Time magazine had a featured cover where it was it was an individual, and he's next to his avatar. That's this black skinned astronaut, and I think he had him in Times Square, and he had this avatar there, and he's next to his avatar, and it's like this opening this portal of this imaginary world. But even the story behind that was that simply somebody asked, hey, could astronauts be black, or something like that came up, and this individual said, you know what, I'm going to make this whole storyline in the metaverse where there's this black astronaut, and he's experiencing all these cool things, and it's gained so much popularity that it was on Time magazine recently. So I think we're going to start to see people do things and experience things and explore concepts and ideas that are not yet fully representative in the physical world. And we have a lot of barriers that we're still kind of like overcoming in the physical world. Like even with people with disabilities, as much as there's accessible laws and requirements for buildings, not everybody with a disability can still enjoy certain places around the world. There's still lack of accessibility around the world, even though there's a billion people with disabilities around the world. It's often it's hard for people to navigate and get around. Even as simple as catching a train or getting on a subway, it's not always accessible experiences. So in the metaverse worlds, you can make it as accessible as you please. You can have everyone access everything. There can be people of all types of diverse backgrounds, languages. The sky's the limit with your imagination. So I think we're going to see more of that happening. So.
And I think I like the way you speak about sort of in your TED talk about this idea of providing learning opportunities to people, and how that there is a doorway to a really beautiful world where if we give access to knowledge, we're giving power to so many people that wouldn't otherwise have it. And I think something like the metaverse, giving people the knowledge of the disability community, with showing the ways that we can have a world that is just as creative, if not more, that is truly accessible, and say, hey, if it's here, why don't we make it out in the physical world too, folks?
That's right. In fact, the games that we're developing are going to educate people who don't have disabilities to learn from people with disabilities. So it'll be a fun game experience in the metaverse and all those things that we're going to do, but it's always going to have a layer of education to it. And we plan on also creating a situation or a learning experience for people with disabilities to learn about Web3 and metaverse so that they can gain skills and make money with their own projects or join an organization and perhaps work for them with the knowledge and skill set. So we're working on that too, as it's in the works.
Wow. And you mentioned earlier that the requirement of needing like a VR headset for the metaverse is something that will hopefully not be the case forever. What is that? What technology is going to be available to people? Because a part of the accessibility is the affordability of things. You know, that so much of the technology needed for these sort of experiences is expensive, and is it sort of moving toward a point where you can access the metaverse without these sort of things, or?
In fact, the only platform providers that we are partnering up with right now have to have, we're saying you cannot just be based on a headset to have the experience. So for us, it's like you can literally use your laptop, you can use your navigation keys to get around, or if you plug in, for example, an Xbox controller that is adaptable or accessible, right, for people with different disabilities, you can use that to get around. Or, you know, there's many different ways in which we'll think about that. For the VR, virtual reality, it's when you want to feel like you're having a first-person experience that's more immersive, where you feel like you are literally in that space, and you can feel like when you're looking around, your avatar's looking around, it's jumping, you're jumping, like that is the experience. So that is something that a lot of VR providers, the technology providers, are like reimagining how they can bring down the price point so it's truly accessible and make it to where it's not like motion sickness driving, so that it's not heavy on the eyes. Some people are creating like lenses like this, right, that you could just put on your eyes and experience something. But then again, they have to consider, what if you're blind, or what if you have some other situation where you can't wear anything on your head. So there's a lot of imagination that needs to be done there.
Amazing. And I'm conscious of time, so I've probably got time for 1.5 questions or thingies. No. But at the end of these conversations, we always like to invite our lovely guests to leave us with a remarkable insight, and that's that encompasses a broad meaning of, that could be a piece of advice or a statistic about the metaverse, or some sort of words of wisdom that you would like to leave people with that are thought-provoking when it comes to designing, you know, tech or experiences for the metaverse. What is something that you would like to leave people with relevant to this topic?
No pressure. I would say, honestly, approach it like we've approached anything else with technology. If you're a technology provider, think about the people that you're trying to create for, and don't leave them out. And it's very simple. That's all I want to say as a message. Don't leave people out of your experiences. Truly be inclusive.
Brilliant. You're brilliant.
The full interview with our guest can be found in the link below where you press play on this podcast, our show notes. Make sure you subscribe or hit follow to not miss another remarkable Insights episode.